So I wanted to talk about this for a little while, and this is the Constitution 1787, Article 2, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of the state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The only time the federal government has any authority off federal lands is when we're at war and war has been properly declared by Congress, and then they can come off the federal lands to do war things. So there cannot be any way that the federal government can declare war against the very thing and people that they were intended to protect. If we go back to the Davis speech that I was going over earlier today, it says that the American system, as we currently know it, is rests on a falsehood. And I'm trying to find exactly where he says that. Okay, I consider, this is Davis' speech from 1841. He says, I consider the whole of what has been termed the American system as founded in error and resting on falsehood and delusion. And yes, in this speech, he's talking about the Public Lands Act that Congress is trying to pass. But the thing is that he's talking about the acts in general that the federal government tries to pass in order to turn power upside down in America. So the founders intended that power belongs in the hands of all the people, and the people give some power, consent to some power to the federal government. And since at least 1841, the federal government has been trying to flip it. And this is what he's talking about in this speech. It just so happens that the Public Lands Act was being passed while this man, Mr. Davis, was in Congress. He was representing New York. And he was talking about this kind of methodical way of the federal government doing a switch of power over a long period of time so that people don't really notice what's happening. And a lot of people will say, it's our fault what's happened. And I don't agree with blaming the victim. We are victims in this. And blaming us, you would have to go back to the early 1800s or even since the inception of the Constitution and blame people all this time. And this is a system that was set up to protect Americans, to protect the people of the state, to protect the inhabitants, and it's been turned on its head. And one of the ways that they've turned it on its head is, I believe, is by not really defining the word state and not really explaining the two different types of states that the Constitution is talking about. So you have dependent states under the Constitution, and you have independent states that created the federal government. And which state does the federal government have control over? Well, it's only what you create that you have control over. So what you create, you control. And since the federal government is a tenant inside the independent states, they cannot make themselves the landlord. So the landlord, there's a landlord-tenant relationship, and the tenant cannot make himself the landlord, just like the slave cannot make himself the master. So the federal government is the slave of the people or the servant of the people. It's not the other way around, but over time, that's what this system is doing. And one of the ways it did it was to create a national bank. So we go back to the Constitution and we look at the well-regulated militia, the only time the federal government called the United States, not United States of America, but the United States being the military portion of the federal government or of the government, the only time they're in control of the militia is when the militia is called into service. So Congress declares war, and then the president, acting as commander in chief of the United States, not the United States of America, he calls the militia into service of the states. And this is the only time that he would have the authority to take the arms from the people. So I believe that in this Article 2, it's got two things: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, because the free states are United States of America. The military is the United States. So not by military power and not by state power. So you have the militia under military power cannot be disarmed, and the people under state power cannot be disarmed, because you have the Articles of Confederation, which acknowledges the states, United States of America, and then you have the Constitution, which is the United States, which is the military power. And we see that in the Articles of Confederation, and we also see that in the Constitution and the preamble. The United States works for the United States of America. So that's my interpretation of the preamble. The United States, meaning the military, works for the United States of America. You can go back and read the preamble and see that. And then in Article 2, you see you have an executive power, which is the president, when he's acting for the United States of America. And then you have the president of the United States military acting as commander-in-chief of the land and naval forces and the militia when called into service. So my interpretation then of Article 2 is the federal government can't take the arms, and the United States of America cannot take arms, because the federal government as a military is in charge of the militia, and the states, the United States of America, has each state has people, and so the states can't disarm the people. So the states can't disarm the people as the United States of America in Congress assembled, and the federal government as the United States in Congress assembled cannot disarm the militia. And the reason why is because the militia is under the United States when called into service, but it's also under United States when they're just people not called into service. Okay, we see that also in the Articles of Confederation, where we have the delegates of the United States of America in Congress assembled. These are the states, and they created the military called the United States in Congress assembled. And you read each state retains its sovereignty. So the states retain their sovereignty. They have a militia, and they have people. And the United States cannot disarm the people, and the United States of America cannot disarm the people. And that's what the Constitution is saying, in my opinion. The military cannot disarm the people, and the states cannot disarm the people. So the states have to keep the federal government from disarming the people, and the federal government has to keep the states from disarming the people. And both are failing in that, because now at congress.gov we see HR 1808, assault weapons ban of 2022, Representative David Cicilline on July 20th, 22, he had a meeting, and then August 8 was the latest action. It's the assault weapons ban. And another thing I have to say about that is assault, you're banning something before it happens. Assault is an action, it's not a thing. An assault weapon is an action, not a thing. So they're banning an action before the action takes place. This is an abstract concept. It hasn't happened. There is no victim, no crime. We know that, right? So how do you ban an act before it happens? Aren't you then saying that someone is guilty before they've committed a crime? Which goes against common sense. It goes against ancient law that's been around for hundreds of years, thousands of years. Okay, no victim, no crime. You're banning an act before it happens. Therefore, you're saying that if you buy an arm, you are guilty of purchasing an assault weapon. And a weapon doesn't assault anything because it's a thing, it's an inanimate object. It's the person who does the thing. And we already have plenty of laws on the book against causing injury or committing criminal acts. But that's outside of the scope of the federal government because, like I've said, the federal government, under the Constitution and constitutional powers, was intended to be for the creation of a military and making rules, regulations, and laws for the military, what they're going to do on the federal lands. So just a quick video on Article 2, again, necessary to a free state. A free state, so it's acknowledging the states are free. It's acknowledging the states are free. So if the states are free, how are they free if you're going to turn around and ban assault weapons, ban an abstract concept that hasn't occurred, an action that hasn't occurred off federal lands where the federal government has no power? If you look at the federal government being small, and these are the dependent states created by the federal government that they have the right to regulate versus the independent states that are supposed to regulate the federal government. And like Davis says in his speech, they've been working on turning the system upside down because they have a love of power. They have a love of the way things are in Europe, where power comes from the top down versus the way the founders intended or seems to have intended, where power comes from the bottom up. Again, each state in the Articles of Confederation, each state retains its sovereignty. This is where the United States of America is. United States of America in Congress assembled. And each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this confederation expressly in writing. So you take it for its word. What it means, it says, and what it says, it means. Expressly delegated to the United States and Congress assembled. When you go to a court to have a contract administered, they follow the contract exactly word for word. The Constitution is a contract. It's expressly delegated. You're supposed to follow it word for word. And we know it's a contract. I've gone over this before because it has the word for in the preamble. And I showed you the source for the word for being a contract. The United States works for, under the contract of the Constitution, for the United States of America. And again, America, free, sovereign, and independent states. To United States and Congress assembled. Okay, now we can do a quick look at the enacting clause. So you have a constitution, and they're always claiming that they have constitutional authority to do this, that, and whatever. But if you look at the preamble of their, let's see if I can find one real quick, of their laws, they're using, wait for it, the preamble of the Articles of Confederation. They're using the preamble and the Articles of Confederation. How do I know that? Because, for one, I can see the preamble on the laws, and two, the Articles of Confederation are the states, and the states are the United States of America in Congress assembled, and the federal government under the Constitution is the United States in Congress assembled. You don't have to believe me. All you have to do is go and read it. So the states are supposed to make the laws for the states, and then the federal government is supposed to make the laws for the military, the federal lands, and they've been, like Davis says, they've been turning it on its head to try to use the federal government to gain control over the states. And by all intents and purposes, it appears as though the states are in on it. They're letting it happen. I'll have to try to find an acting clause. Let's see if we can find an acting clause where it says, and I know you've probably seen it, it says the House of Representatives and Senate of the United States of America in Congress assembled this da 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 da, and that's an enacting clause for or from the Articles of Confederation. So it looks as though the federal government is not the federal government, it's the states under the Articles of Confederation that are trying to use the Constitution to disarm the people. So it's the states trying to disarm the people when they gather together in Congress assembled. There's got to be one. This can't be this difficult. I see them all the time. It's the enacting clause. If I can't find one here in a second, then I'll just post it. I'll post a link in the comments section. I usually don't have any problem finding an enacting clause. Okay, here we go. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. These are the states, the United States of America in Congress assembled. And they have a military force, a joint military force, regulated by all the states. They're supposed to keep the federal government in check, and the federal government, to some extent, keeps the states in check so that neither one of them can disarm the people. And because power has been turned on its head and we have a top-down system, it's the federal government and the states over the people. And that's what they want. They want the federal government to be like Europe and all-powerful over all the people, whereas originally it was supposed to be the people in power over the collective states and the federal government. And we'll be continuing the Davis speech soon. Maybe I'll post one or two more today. I'm hoping to get through with it today, but I'm not sure how that's going to go because it's already my time after 5 and I have other things to do. But the enacting clause, if you watched my other video, if not, if you might already know what it means, but if not, the enacting clause is where they get their power. So it's basically saying we get our power from the Articles of Confederation. If the enacting clause was the United States in Congress assembled, it would be we get our power from the Constitution. And so the Constitution would be used in times of war or emergency, which we'll see in the Davis speech. And the Articles of Confederation would be used in peacetime. And so they can't take arms of the people either in war or peace by federal power or state power, because it's necessary to a free state, and the free states are acknowledged in the Articles of Confederation. And people are still in love, so in love with the Constitution that they completely reject the Articles of Confederation. But you can't have a Constitution without the Articles of Confederation. And we also see this in the Constitution where it says the United States has power to do certain things in Article 1, Section 1, to legislate. But they have the right to legislate over the federal lands, which we see in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. So all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested to in a Congress of the United States, not a Congress of the United States of America. That's in the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so a new way to look at the importance of Article 2 of the Constitution, what it says and what it means, and how nobody has the power to take arms from the people or the militia, because it's all necessary to a free state. And the Articles of Confederation guarantee your free state, and the Constitution is supposed to protect us from the state, and the states are supposed to protect us from the military. And because they're all in bed together, nobody's protecting the people. Okay, so there you have it. Think about the abstracts, the enacted clause, the Articles of Confederation, the United States of America, the Constitution, the United States, and what it all means. And questions, comments, of course, in the comments section. And I'll see you there in the comments section. I try to acknowledge and, if need be, reply to all comments. I just give what I think I know, what I believe. I may be right, I may be wrong. It doesn't matter, because we're just having conversations about the world we live in today and what kind of world we want to live in tomorrow. That's why this stuff is so important. Okay, so you guys take care, like, share, subscribe, talk about this stuff, this important stuff with your family members, friends, acquaintances, down at the coffee shop or the bar or wherever you go. And I'll see y'all in the next video.